Why did she even bother showing up to briefings anymore? That was the question whispering through Staff Sergeant Reese Caldwell's mind as she stood at the edge of the operations table, ignored by the room full of men who believed they already knew everything worth knowing. The SEAL platoon laughed among themselves, their confidence thick in the dusty air of Forward Operating Base Chapman. Their bravado echoed against walls plastered with mission maps and pinned intel photos. Danger learned to look ordinary out here. But Reese wasn't looking at them. She was watching the wind. It had a way of shifting right before trouble arrived. Her grandfather used to say that, and tonight the wind was restless. She kept her posture straight, hands behind her back, eyes steady, an appearance she'd honed from years of swallowing what she wanted to say. She shouldn't need to announce her worth. She'd proved it on the cold mountaintops of Montana long before Afghanistan tried to break her. Still it burned, the dismissal, the sideways glances, the quiet belief that because she wasn't one of them, because she wasn't a man, she somehow didn't belong here. Master Chief Jake Morrison stabbed a finger at a terrain projection, his voice sharp and certain. We take the eastern ridge as overwatch. Snipers will have direct line of sight down to the compound. Easy work. Reese's throat tightened. Easy work for who? She saw what they didn't. The inverted airflow, the morning turbulence, mirage waves distorting visibility, the cave's position like waiting jaws above the approach route. Her analysis sat unreviewed in the folder on the table, a silent warning already dismissed as unnecessary. She forced herself to speak anyway. Chief, she said calmly, the eastern ridge is going to create visual distortion at dawn. Winds will funnel right into your firing lane. I recommend. Morrison's head turned slowly. His expression was carved from stone. Staff Sergeant Caldwell. He spoke her rank like it was an inconvenience. We've run mountains longer than you've held a rifle. Go back to your screens. We'll handle the shooter's work. The room chuckled, just a little, just enough. Reese didn't flinch, because beneath their dismissal was fear, the kind of fear that pretends it knows everything, the kind that gets people killed. She returned to her seat without another word. But something inside her hardened. Hours later, the base fell into pre-mission silence, the kind that sets your pulse to a slower rhythm, preparing you for the worst. Reese sat alone in the dim light of the makeshift operations center, cleaning the spotting scope she technically wasn't assigned. Every swipe of the cloth brought back memories, her grandfather's voice, Montana's sharp morning air, the way he'd rest his weathered hand on her shoulder when she missed a target. Breathe with the land, he'd remind her. It will tell you the truth before men ever will. If only she could breathe with this land. Despite years in Afghanistan, she could never quite make sense of its contradictions, beautiful ridges hiding violent intentions, sand that carried bones and secrets, sunrises that promised hope and delivered chaos. She traced the barrel of the M24 she'd borrowed under a technical excuse. The rifle wasn't regulation for her role, but rules were written far from here, by people who didn't know how wind could bend a man's fate. She closed her eyes. What felt heavier, her gear, or the knowledge that no one would listen until she was the last voice standing? The desert was a canvas of shadows as she slipped through the wire, keeping to blind spots in the guard posts, scanning rhythm. She moved with quiet purpose. This wasn't disobedience. This was prevention. Lives depended on truth, not ego. She reached the goat trail she'd discovered in Soviet-era surveys, climbing in silence. Muscles burned, sweat chilled against her spine, but her breathing remained slow and measured. Every step pulled her farther from the version of herself they believed she was. Her hands, gloved but steady, placed the rifle onto the chosen northern ridge, its vantage perfect. From here she saw everything: the valley floor, the limestone caves, the route the SEAL team would take. And she saw what she feared most: enemy fighters already waiting. 3 distinct positions: PKM machine gun, elevated advantage, clear kill zone. Her heartbeat didn't quicken. It slowed, because now the equation was simple. Speak up and be ignored again. Or fire. Not yet, she thought, not unless she had no other choice. Radio chatter crackled into life. Team Charlie beginning infiltration. Through her scope, she watched them, 6 human silhouettes against a valley that didn't want them there. Young men pretending not to fear, boots too loud for ground that demanded respect. They were 300 meters from death. Reese keyed her radio. Any station, this is Caldwell, enemy eyes on your approach. 3 positions, grid marking now. You are heading into a kill. Morrison cut her off, voice venom. Caldwell, what the hell? Get off this channel, return to base. A machine gun barrel shifted in the cave. 25 seconds. Another fighter perked up, alert, movement, readiness. 20 seconds. Her breath steadied. 18. The wind shifted, just a whisper, enough for her, enough for the truth. 16 seconds. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle jumped. The sound rolled off the mountains like a warning too late for those who ignored warnings. 2.1 seconds later, the PKM gunner collapsed backward. The cave erupted in panic. She cycled another round. The second fighter leaned into view. Wrong decision. The bullet found him before gravity did. Third shot, minor wind variance. She compensated without thinking. Center mass. 3 men fell in silence. Only then did Reese hear the seals, confusion through the comms. What was that? Who's firing? Morrison's voice was ice cracking. Identify yourself, now. Her tone remained calm, unapologetic. Caldwell, Northern Ridge, imminent threat neutralized. Silence heavy, disbelieving. She wasn't done. 2 more caves, bearing 170 degrees from your point, team. Elevation plus 30 meters. Advise immediate fire support. The SEAL sniper tried taking shots, missed wide. The wind mocked him. Reese murmured into the radio. Tell your shooter to hold 8 MOA left. Add 2 up. Thermal distortion on the slope, trust me. A pause. Then shots landed correctly. Lives corrected by the voice they'd ignored. When the team returned hours later, alive, Chapman's morning sun was blinding, almost cruel in its brightness. Inside the briefing room, no one laughed now. Drone footage confirmed everything: the ambush, the timing, the inevitability if she hadn't acted. Morrison stared at her for a long moment, seeing her for the first time. He cleared his throat. Staff Sergeant Caldwell's initiative prevented multiple casualties. Her precision overwatch was exemplary. The words were stiff, forced, but real. Reese didn't smile. Victory in survival wasn't joy, it was relief sharpened into exhaustion. The SEAL she saved, the youngest, hesitated before leaving. He placed a worn challenge coin beside her hand, a quiet acknowledgement, a silent thank you. Then he was gone. Later in her bunk, Reese stared at her grandfather's photo. Him in his dress blues, stern, proud, surviving what others didn't. She whispered to the empty room, voice a cracked breath. You were right, respect isn't given. She looked at her hands, the ones they had doubted. It's earned. But the weight didn't lift. Because beneath the adrenaline, beneath the vindication, something darker pooled inside her chest. She took 3 lives today. She saved 6. Which number mattered more? Would it ever feel like enough? The wind outside rustled the tent flap. The land always knew before the people did. And somewhere deep in that shifting air was a warning. This wasn't the mission she'd be remembered for. It was only the beginning. Why couldn't she feel proud? Everyone told her she should be, that she had saved lives, that 6 men were breathing because of her hands, steady, unforgiving, necessary. But as the C-130 roared above the clouds on her way to Fort Bragg, Reese Caldwell sat perfectly still, staring at her palms as if they belonged to someone else. The engines hummed like a heartbeat in the metal ribs of the aircraft, a constant reminder that she was being moved, selected, changed. She should have felt something triumphant. Instead, she only felt heavy. The challenge coin the seal had given her rested in her pocket, a small weight with too much meaning. She rolled it between her fingers, metal warm against skin. Respect was earned, yes. But respect came with a price. One she hadn't fully counted on. A jumpmaster walked past and nodded at her, recognizing the quiet focus of someone replaying every decision that brought them to this point. Around her, operators slept or pretended to. Downrange missions still burned behind their eyelids. War never stayed where it happened. The plane shuddered through turbulence, and a brief thought flickered across her mind. What if they were wrong about her? Not the SEALs, not the command. Her grandfather. The man who believed she had something rare, the sense to read the world through silence, not noise. What if she wasn't ready for what came next? She closed her eyes and saw the bodies drop, slow, inevitable. The math made them necessary, but necessity didn't erase them. The shots that saved lives also haunted her, precise decisions with irreversible outcomes. The rifle had spoken for her when words couldn't. Now she had to live with what it said. Fort Bragg smelled like pine in memory. The cadence of boots on gravel, the echo of distant gunfire, flags snapping in a breeze that seemed colder than Afghanistan's hardest nights. This place had a way of stripping you down and forcing you to rebuild if you survived the process. The cadre at the Special Operations Target Interdiction course didn't smile when they saw her. They didn't shake her hand. They didn't congratulate her on being the first female intel specialist to attend. They just evaluated her. Judge first, accept later, maybe. Reese felt eyes drilling into her as she stood at attention outside the training pavilion. Sniper candidates from different units formed in rows: Rangers, Marines, Special Forces support, seasoned shooters with reputations she could feel radiating off them like heat. She didn't belong here. At least, that's what the murmurs thought. "Intel chick," someone whispered behind her. "No way she holds up. Look at her shoulders. Bet she's never rucked a real mountain." She ignored it. She always ignored it. But ignoring didn't equal not hearing. Chief Warrant Officer Hale, the course's lead, stalked in front of the formation like a panther measuring prey. "I don't care who sent you here. I don't care what unit patch you wear. I don't care what stories follow you." His voice boomed with the certainty of a man who has buried more mistakes than he's willing to admit. "You are all unproven." His eyes landed on her for a beat too long. Reese didn't blink. "You want to be snipers? Then you'd better pray your minds are sharper than your marksmanship. We don't teach killing here. We teach consequences." A deliberate pause. "Killing is the easy part." The words punched right where Reese was weakest. Her chest tightened. Yes, killing was mechanical, predictable, a math problem solved with gunpowder and wind. Consequences were messy. Consequences had names. The first week wasn't about shooting, it was about breaking. Physical testing, stress shoots, long rucks with unrealistic time hacks, zero sleep, high pressure. Prove you can think while your body begs you to stop. Night nav under blackout, landmarks erased by darkness, every wrong step a reminder that the ground always wins. Reese didn't excel. She endured. Her pack cut into her shoulders, her boots chewed through sock and skin, but she stayed in the front half of every group, silent, breath-controlled, eyes steady. The instructors noticed. The candidates noticed too, reluctantly. One night during a blindfolded rifle assembly drill, The Marine to her left, Staff Sergeant Quinn, muttered under his breath. "How the hell are your hands so calm?" Reese didn't look up from the receiver. She was aligning by touch alone. "I grew up hunting in storms," she said quietly. "Cold teaches stillness." He chuckled once, not cruelly, almost impressed. "You're weird," he said. "I know." A moment later, the cadre barked. "Time." Reese finished in silence. Perfect alignment, zero fumbling, zero doubt. Hale lifted her rifle to inspect. "Good," he said, "not praise, just fact." It meant more than a medal. But still that emptiness lingered. Because even here, surrounded by people who lived and breathed precision, she couldn't outrun the ghosts of the 3 men she dropped in Afghanistan. Perfect shots weren't painless. They just hid the pain better. 2 weeks in, they finally touched rifles. The classroom was filled with ballistic charts, atmospheric graphs, and enough math to make a physicist sweat. Students scribbled notes, trying to keep up. Reese didn't write anything. She already knew it. Hale watched her from across the room, curiosity replacing suspicion. During range drills, when other shooters struggled with wind calls, Reese read mirage waves like a second language. The bullet travel time wasn't a number for her. It was a rhythm she could feel. She spotted and corrected for others without hesitation, calling impacts before they landed. Every perfect prediction etched deeper into her chest. This is who you are. This is who he raised you to be. On long-range day, the instructors pushed them to 1,200 meters. Few shots hit, frustration flared, tempers snapped. Reese adjusted her dope, breath slow. Wind, shifting microcurrents from the left. Thermal lift near the boulder. Humidity low, bullet flight tighter. She squeezed. Delayed impact, then a faint metallic ring. A perfect hit. The range went quiet. Someone behind her muttered, awed and bitter. "It's always the quiet ones." Hale stood nearby, arms crossed, his voice low. "Where did you learn to read wind like that?" Reese kept her eyes downrange. "Someone taught me to listen. To the wind. To everything men ignore." Hale didn't say anything for a long time. But the way he looked at her changed. Night after night, Reese dreamed of the caves. The flash of muzzle fire, the silent collapse of bodies, the radio static, Morrison's anger, the moment she chose consequence over command. She woke with clenched fists and a cold sweat coating her spine. Sometimes she'd see not 3 figures but dozens, faceless, falling into shadow. The mind didn't settle just because others believed you were right. Quiet hours became her heaviest burden. During a late-night gear check, Quinn asked softly, "You okay, Caldwell?" She hesitated. Then she lied. "Yeah." He studied her, not starring, not pushing, just noticing. "You know, some of us like that you're here," he said. "Someone who actually thinks before they pull the trigger." She forced a small exhale, not quite a laugh. "If only that made it easier." Quinn nodded, understanding more than he admitted. "Because here's the truth. Every sniper was haunted. They just hid their ghosts differently." Halfway through training, Hale gathered them at the edge of the range. His voice lowered, serious, grounded. "In this line of work, you don't fire unless you accept that the bullet lives longer than the moment it's released. You don't shoot unless you are willing to keep that person with you. Forever." Reese swallowed hard, her throat burned. Was saving lives enough justification for taking others? Would it ever be? Hale turned his back to them and spoke like he knew what kept her awake. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't explain itself. It acts, quietly. You will have to decide what your dignity asks of you on every mission." The wind swept past them, carrying the scent of pine and spent gunpowder. Reese took a slow breath. She didn't feel lighter. But she felt understood, even if only by one person. And that mattered more than she expected. Weeks turned into scars and skill. Her aim became an extension of thought. Her silence grew stronger than any proof she could present in a briefing room. Yet the fear remained. Once you take that first shot, does it ever really stop? Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Commander Hakam Rashidi resurfaced. New intel, new mission. Deployment soon. Be ready. The name hit like a strike to the sternum. The fight wasn't over. And the man she'd killed for, the one whose life she saved, would soon be standing beside her in a place where doubt could get them all killed. Afghanistan wasn't finished with her. The real story was just starting to unfold. Why did memories hurt more than the present? Reese didn't know, but every time she tried to sleep, the past crept in quieter than any enemy, sharper than any sniper's round. It arrived in fragments: a cold dawn, the snap of frost beneath boots, her grandfather's hand steadying hers on a rifle far too big for a 12-year-old girl. Montana wasn't forgiving. It trained people without asking permission. The Absaroka Mountains stretched into forever, slate-gray ridges slicing up through sky so blue it looked brand new every morning. Out there, you learned exactly who you were and how much that person could survive. Her grandfather stood beside her, legs wide, stance rooted, a silhouette of quiet authority against the rising sun. He didn't smile much, didn't need to. His presence did the speaking. Breathe with the land, he told her, always his first lesson. Don't force it, let the world move through you. Little Reese inhaled the crisp morning air, a thin, sharp blade in her lungs. She tried to keep the rifle level, but the weight pulled at her arms. It's heavy, she whispered. So is anything worth carrying, Eugene replied, eyes scanning the horizon. Strength ain't in the arms, it's in the choice to lift anyway. She tried again. The deer at the tree line didn't know she was there. Her pulse pounded in her ears, too loud for precision. She blinked hard to force the sight picture back into focus. You'll miss if you shoot scared. I'm not scared. Of course you are, he said softly. Being scared just means you care. He crouched beside her, his voice dropping to the tone he used when truths mattered. The world won't care how loud you talk. It listens when you prove it wrong. She fired. The recoil shoved her shoulder back. The shot cracked the mountains apart for a heartbeat. The bullet punched dirt 2 feet wide of the target. Reese's face fell, hot with embarrassment. Her grandfather nodded once. Good. But I missed. You took the shot, he corrected. Missing just tells you where to start learning. Reese swallowed frustration, but he put a hand under her chin, lifting her gaze. You'll get it because you see the world different. She didn't understand what he meant then. Later she would. But not every lesson came on the rifle range. Some came during the nights he sat at the kitchen table when he thought she was asleep, staring into a darkness without walls, fingers trembling like they were still curled around a trigger, eyes red from battles he never spoke aloud. Vietnam left echoes behind. One evening, she found him kneeling in the yard, sweating in the winter air, hands pressed to the frozen ground like he was trying to calm the earth beneath him. Grandpa, she whispered. He looked up, breath ragged, pupils wide like he'd come back from someplace terrible. Don't ever think taking a life leaves you when you take the shot, he said. It wasn't a warning, it was a confession. Those you take, they take a piece of you back. She didn't understand why he looked so afraid of her answer. Then why do you keep teaching me? Eugene closed his eyes. Something in his chest collapsed inward. When he spoke again, the strength was still there, but wrapped in sorrow. So you'll know when to stop. She grew older, stronger, and eventually better than anyone expected. Her grandfather took her on bigger hunts, shooting elk at 800 yards. hitting stationary targets so far out they turned into dots blinking in heat shimmer. She learned to measure wind by the sway of one blade of grass, learned patience in the way snow fell differently depending on where the mountain wanted you to go. She learned that silence wasn't absence. Silence was information. One late autumn afternoon, a storm rolled in faster than expected. Lightning flashed against ridges turning black in the brewing night. They were miles from camp, and Reese saw panic flicker beneath her grandfather's calm. "Storm's wrong," he muttered, scanning the clouds. "Feels angry." They started back. Rain became a wall, trees bent and groaned. Reese stumbled on the muddy uphill climb, fear clawing at her throat. Her grandfather didn't yell, didn't rush. He placed his hands on her shoulders. "Look at me." Her shaking slowed. "Aim small, Miss Small," he said, "not about shooting now but surviving. One step, then another, that's how you make it home." Through wind that tried to tear them apart, they moved, small steps that saved them. By midnight, they reached the safety of camp. Reese's teeth chattered uncontrollably as she curled up in her sleeping bag. Eugene sat across from her, feeding the fire just enough to keep them warm without burning too bright. When she finally drifted toward sleep, she heard him say quietly, to no one, to ghosts perhaps, "I couldn't save them, but I'll save you." She didn't forget that. Ever. Years later he got sick. The kind of sick strength couldn't fight. His hair thinned, his breath shortened, but his eyes, they never softened. He watched her graduate basic, watched her pin on her first rank, watched her walk into the recruiter's office determined to prove she belonged beside the men who doubted her. He didn't live long enough to see her deployed. But before he left, he called her close, gripping her hand with the same roughness that steadied rifles and broken hearts. "Promise me something." "What?" "No matter what they say, you don't shrink yourself to fit anyone's small idea of you." Tears threatened her eyes. He squeezed harder. "And when you save someone who doesn't deserve you, and you will, don't let them take your pride as payment." Reese couldn't speak. He pulled her into his chest, ribs sharp beneath thin skin. "You are not the bullet." He whispered the words into her hair, voice trembling. "You are the reason it flies true." He died 2 months later. She buried him under the mountain, where silence taught her everything. She enlisted the next week. Not to honor him, to continue him. Back in Fort Bragg, Reese walked the range alone, moonlight silvering the rifles laid out like guardians in waiting. The wind brushed her cheek, familiar, comforting, like Montana saying, "Still here, still yours." She knelt, resting her palm on the cold barrel of her M2010. She felt a shiver, not from the cold, from the truth. Her grandfather taught her how to shoot, but war was teaching her why. Her radio buzzed with Hale's voice. "Caldwell, briefing room tomorrow. You're deploying sooner than scheduled." Her chest tightened. The mountains were calling again, not Montana's this time. Afghanistan. The man she'd killed for Morrison's youngest operator would be there too, along with enemies who now knew a ghost on the northern ridge had stolen 3 brothers from them. Reese exhaled, long and steady. She wasn't 12 anymore. The rifle didn't feel heavy. But the memories did. She rested her fingers on the challenge coin, the silent proof of a life saved. Her grandfather used to say the world listens when you prove it wrong. She had proved it wrong. And the world was about to listen again. Why did her hands shake only when she was safe? Reese wondered that as she stared at them, trembling slightly over a cup of burned coffee in the dim light of a transport tent at Bagram Air Base. When she was steady behind a rifle, she felt in control. But the quiet moments afterward, those were when instability crept in, soft but merciless. She curled her fingers tighter around the cup until the tremor stopped. It always stopped if she forced it to. But the fear remained, a small, sharp thing gnawing beneath the ribs, whispering that steadiness was not strength, only a mask. Special operations teams moved everywhere around her, gear checked, comms tested, weapons slung. War was unfolding inch by inch, mission by mission, and she was expected to perform flawlessly again. No mistakes, no weakness, no humanity. The door flap rustled as Master Chief Morrison stepped inside. His presence pulled the space into formation. "Caldwell," he said, voice clipped. "Pre-brief in 10. Commander Rashidi's cell has resurfaced. We move tonight." Her pulse thudded once deep. Rashidi. The name was carved into her memory like shrapnel. The Taliban commander she'd disrupted. The ambush she'd shattered. The men she'd taken from him. He would be waiting. Morrison didn't linger. No praise, no doubts spoken aloud, just orders. But his look, that brief pause of his eyes on her, held something complicated. Recognition, dependence, maybe even trust. Regardless, the mission needed her. And that was both validation and punishment. The briefing room was packed with tension and fluorescent glare. The SEALs studied intel slides, adrenaline simmering under stoic demeanor. They didn't look at her like a mistake anymore. They looked at her like a weapon. Hail from sniper school had been right, killing was the easy part. It was everything afterward that hurt. Reese took notes, but the blur of images triggered flashes she couldn't fully control: sandstorm cave, muzzle flashes, the recoil that carried weight beyond physics. Her breath hitched barely. She forced it even again. Then a voice from behind. "You good, Caldwell?" It was the operator she saved, Petty Officer Ryan Hale. Young, sharp-eyed, carrying the challenge coin twin to hers. She nodded, but her eyes stayed forward. He leaned closer, speaking low. "We're alive because of you, don't forget that." She didn't respond, couldn't. Gratitude always carried guilt on its back. Her attention snapped back to Morrison. "Overwatch position here," he pointed to a ridge on the satellite map. "Wind looks mild but changing. Caldwell will advise your sniper team." His tone was matter of fact, no sneer, no sarcasm. Acceptance wearing the voice of professionalism. But acceptance came with pressure. Don't fail now. Not after proving yourself once. Reese's stomach tightened. Pressure sharpened her, but pressure also cracked the places already split. Later, she sat alone on a stone step outside the tent city, stringing her rifle sling through gloved fingers like rosary beads. Her head throbbed from too many sleepless nights. Her chest felt hollow. She hadn't fired a single shot since Fort Bragg. And she didn't want to. A shadow moved near her, Quinn, the Marine sniper candidate who'd become an unexpected friend through endurance and misery shared. "You disappeared without a goodbye," he said. "Orders came fast," she replied, eyes fixed on the distant mountains. He sat beside her, stretching sore legs. "How's the mind holding up?" She almost laughed. "It's the part that keeps glitching." He studied her carefully. "You know what my instructor told me once? You can train the trigger finger, you can't train the heart." He nudged her shoulder lightly. "But the heart is the part that keeps us human." Reese stared at her trembling hand. Human. She didn't feel like that anymore. Quinn stood, dusting off his fatigues. "You ever need to talk, actually talk, you know where to find me." She nodded, though she knew she wouldn't. Talking made things real. And real was harder to shoot through. Night came fast. The valley where Rashidi's network hid was a jagged scar in the earth, moonlight scraping along its edges. Reese hiked with the Overwatch team, her legs strong but her mind fighting to stay above the sinking swell of thoughts. Every footstep carried strain, every breath was work. Flashback voices haunted her pace. Sometimes dignity acts quietly. But the shots never stayed quiet once the echo reached your conscience. Her ruck felt heavier than ever, not because of gear, but because of memory. When they reached the shooting position, the wind shifted like a test she didn't study right. The SEAL sniper team leader, Petty Officer Marcus Vance, set up his rifle first. Arrogant competence radiated from him. "You spotting or shooting tonight?" he asked without looking. "Spotting," she answered. "Good," he said, dismissive by habit, not cruelty. Roles defined, pressure focused. She set her spotting scope. Her hand stilled instantly, like shaking had never existed. Her eyes sharpened, depth, distance, angle, the world snapping into geometry. Down in the valley, patrols shifted through shadows. She tracked thermal silhouettes, enemies blending into terrain that wanted to keep them hidden. Her breathing slowed, her mind sharpened, the mission reclaimed control. 3 targets by the southern wall, she whispered. Primary with a radio could be their node. Vance aligned his shot. She guided wind callouts, perfect, precise, automatic. He exhaled and fired. The radio operator collapsed soundless. Her chest clenched hard, not like triumph, like panic. Something inside her squeezed, a cold electric knot spiraling tight. Her palms suddenly slick. Her throat dry. The next target blurred in the scope, edges swimming. She blinked hard. The world steadied, but her heartbeat didn't. She forced her voice out. "Adjust .2 mils right." Vance fired again. Another life gone cold. Reese's lungs refused to expand fully. A tremor started at the base of her neck and traveled down her spine like a fuse lit inward. She tried to swallow the rising tide. But the flood broke. Her chest seized, heart racing too fast, vision tightening into a tunnel. The sound of a PKM echoed in memory, the caves, the wind, the bodies falling. Her hand slipped off the scope. She stumbled back, breath sharp and useless. Vance turned, irritated. What the hell? Ryan Hale stepped forward immediately, saw what others refused to see. "She's having a panic spike. Back off." Panic spike. A gentle name for a violent storm. Her legs buckled. Dirt rushed up to meet her knees as she gasped at the cold night, clawing for air that didn't want to come. Not here, not now, not when she had to be perfect. Ryan knelt in front of her, not touching her, but grounding her with the steadiness of his gaze. "Look at me, you're okay," he said, voice steady. "You're right here on this ridge, you're not back in that cave." Her breaths came short, sharp, broken. She whispered, shame burning hotter than fear. "I can't be the reason they die." Ryan shook his head firmly. "You're the reason we lived." She forced one more breath, then another, shaky but real. The threat wasn't gone. Her hands still quivered, but she could see again, hear again, breathe again. Vance muttered something under his breath, but he didn't argue, not with results on the line. Reese wiped her eyes quickly, not tears, just panic trying to escape. She crawled back to her scope. She wasn't done. Her voice, thin but controlled, cut through the comms. 3 more fighters, grid marking now, prepare to engage. Shaking hands steadied. Broken breath found rhythm. Duty demanded silence. And silence demanded strength. Hours later, after extraction, the SEALs didn't mention what happened. Not the panic, not the stuttered breaths, not the fear. Because she performed anyway. Maybe that was the measure that mattered. But when she was finally alone, she sat on her cot with her head in her hands, fingers gripping her hair as if she could anchor herself to the moment and not drift into the past. Her chest ached, her brain felt bruised. She whispered to the dark, "I can't break." Her grandfather's voice echoed back, "You can, everyone does. What matters is whether you build again." The night didn't feel comforting, but it didn't feel lost. Reese lay back, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere inside her, the tremor faded. She closed her eyes, exhausted. Not defeated. because tomorrow she would steady her hands again, even if they shook tonight. How do you defend yourself against someone who already knows your greatest fear? Reese didn't have the answer, but the enemy who hunted her was trying hard to find it. Days after the operation where panic pinned her to the ridge, things began to shift around the base. The wind felt sharper. The air tasted different. Danger sometimes announced itself long before violence arrived, but only to the ones paying attention. Reese always paid attention. She sat on an ammo crate outside the motor pool, polishing the lens of her spotting scope in slow, careful circles. Ryan Hale lingered nearby, not speaking unless she needed him to. The unspoken rule. Sometimes silence was the only language that helped you breathe. "You eating?" he asked quietly. "Later." "You said later 3 hours ago." She didn't respond. Her focus stayed on the glass, like clarity in the lens might translate into clarity in her thoughts. Ryan exhaled, not pushing. "We've got a patrol in 2, overwatch only. Low threat, they say." He rolled his eyes, which obviously means they're lying. Reese gave the faintest smirk. That was the closest she got to laughing these days. But inside, fear stirred like embers catching wind. Every mission since the panic attack felt like walking through a glass tunnel, clear to see the danger, impossible to escape from it. She looked at her hands, still controlled, until they wouldn't be. Her mind whispered the same doubt constantly. What if you freeze again? What if someone dies because you're the broken one? Ryan seemed to sense the storm beneath her calm. "You did good," he said. "You pushed through it." Pushing through isn't the same as winning. Still counted for us. He meant it, she could feel that, but meaning didn't erase fear. It only kept it quiet for a moment. Night dragged a curtain over the sky as they moved out, mixing into the terrain like shadows given purpose. The moon was a thin, silver cut, barely enough light to illuminate the valley below. Reese crawled to overwatch position, laying flat behind her rifle. Her breath synced with the ground, mountain to body, body to heartbeat. This was where she felt capable again. The unit she watched moved like ghosts, disciplined, efficient, silent. But the mountains had a way of hiding teeth. She swept her scope across the village ahead. Corrugated metal roofs, clay brick homes, narrow paths twisting like veins. Nothing stood out. But her skin prickled. Instinct sharpened faster than logic. She keyed her radio. Movement possible, north corner, basement entry. No eyes yet, just watch that sector. Ryan checked his binoculars. "I don't see anything." "I know," she whispered. "Just trust me." She hated how uncertain her voice sounded. Doubt felt like a weight strapped to her throat. The patrol advanced. Minutes passed like hours. Then figures, fast, precise, emerging from shadows with the confidence of those who knew exactly where the Americans would be. Reese's pulse spiked, focus narrowed, adrenaline drowned fear. "Contact 3 fighters east wall," she called. Shots erupted. The SEALs engaged hard, returning fire. Reese steadied her scope, but something felt off. Wrong. The enemy wasn't scattered or desperate. They were hunting. A muzzle flash glinted. Long rifle, elevated position, camouflaged perfectly into the rocks across the valley. Her heart cracked with realization. Not just enemies. A sniper. Her sniper. The moment stretched, thin and dangerous. Reese's breath locked halfway in her lungs. The enemy shooter fired. A SEAL went down. Not dead, screaming, leg torn open, blood spraying dust into the night. Ryan shouted into comms for a medic, but Reese barely heard him. The enemy sniper shifted again, a predator tasting success. He wasn't aiming at the team anymore. He adjusted upward. Toward the Overwatch ridge. Toward her. Her stomach dropped. This was personal. The glint in the distance flickered again, Decision made. He sees us, she hissed. He's targeting Overwatch. Ryan lunged and tackled her to the ground just as the bullet snapped through the space where her head had been a heartbeat earlier. Dirt exploded in a violent spray over her pack. Reese's hands shook uncontrollably, panic roaring back with teeth bared. She tasted iron under her tongue, breath breaking. Ryan pressed his shoulder against hers, grounding her again. Caldwell, stay with me. We need your eyes. She forced focus. Enemy sniper was still moving, repositioning like he wanted her to chase the shot, to panic into a mistake. He was skilled, and he wasn't guessing. He wanted her specifically. Another shot cracked closer, too close. Her ears rang, her lungs seized. Breathe with the land. Her grandfather's voice. Out of nowhere. Exactly when she needed it. Her heartbeat slowed, not enough but enough. She slid her rifle back into position. Spot her up, she whispered through clenched teeth. Ryan kept watch with binos, his voice steadier than hers. Rock shelf, 110 meters above that thin juniper. You see it. She scanned. Scanning wasn't enough. She needed silence, patience, truth. Then a shimmer, heat disturbance, just a breath of movement. She saw him. White keffiyeh, precision posture, the glint of optics. 1,326 meters. She cursed silently. Extreme distance, high angle, wind shifting. Panic wanted to control her hands. She didn't let it. She ran the math like prayer. Wind, 14 knots shifting quartering. Elevation, 29 degrees up. Bullet drop, 22.4 MOA. Time to impact, 2.4 seconds. Breath 1 in, 1 out. Fear denied. She squeezed. Her rifle bucked. The bullet flew. Then an answering shot. Not from her rifle. His. He'd fired at the same time. Her round missed close but not enough. His round didn't miss entirely. It grazed Ryan's bicep, a flash of blood and fabric tearing. He grunted in pain but didn't drop. Forget me, he growled, finish him. But this wasn't a two-player game. This was a message. Rashidi's forces had learned something. A ghost sniper on the northern ridge had killed 3 of theirs. And ghosts could bleed. Reese swallowed hard, eyes burning. She hadn't failed. But she hadn't protected everyone either. The sniper escaped under cover of darkness. Mission aborted, casualty evacuated, silence thick with frustration. Ryan's bandage soaked red against white gauze, carried into the med tent with a pained smile that tried too hard to be brave. Reese sat outside alone, shaking again, head pressed against her knees. Not victorious. Not confident. Just terrified. Because tonight proved what she feared most. The enemy wasn't trying to kill her teammates anymore. They were trying to kill her. For the first time, Reese questioned whether she was strong enough to keep going. Her grandfather's voice returned once more. You are not the bullet. You are the reason it flies true. She exhaled barely. The war wasn't following her. It was coming for her. And the part that scared her most. They weren't wrong to try. She was the threat now. But threats break. And she was breaking. Why couldn't she just be normal? Reese asked herself that as she sat on the edge of a cot in the base medical tent, elbows on her knees, head in her hands. She hated this place, the smell of antiseptic masking, the smell of blood, the way fluorescent lights never softened, the gentle voices that made you feel weaker instead of safe. Ryan was across the room, arm bandaged, joking with the medic as if nearly bleeding out was just another Tuesday. He kept glancing her way, checking, worrying. That made her feel worse. She wasn't wounded. Not physically. And that made everything harder to explain. A female psychologist, capped Aria Lawson, walked over and sat quietly beside her. No clipboard, no interrogation posture, just presence. "I hear you saved everyone again," Lawson said softly. Reese didn't respond. Her attention stayed fixed on the tile floor, tiny cracks forming fractured maps that led nowhere. "Which part of that feels like failure?" Lawson asked gently. Reese's throat closed. The air felt sharp in her chest. Her voice cracked. "Everyone thinks I'm fine, that because I can pull a trigger at the right second I'm not scared." She swallowed hard. "I'm terrified every time." Lawson nodded. "That's called being sane." Reese let out a shaky breath. "Sane doesn't feel like this." "What does it feel like?" Reese stared at her palms, steady now, too steady. "Like I'm made of glass. Like if one more bullet comes close, I'll break." "Then we need to make you stronger than glass," Lawson said. "We don't fix what you feel, we make room for it. You walk through it." Reese hated how badly she wanted to believe those words. The psychologist leaned closer. "You're holding the wind inside you," she whispered. "And the wind doesn't stop, it just looks quiet." Silence settled like a blanket, not comforting but present. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Lawson said, "but you do have to stop lying to yourself." Reese's jaw clenched. "If I admit I'm scared, what if I can't stop being scared?" Lawson replied instantly. "Then you fight scared, and you survive scared, and that still counts." Reese blinked hard, trying to hold herself together, but she couldn't stop the confession from slipping out in a breath. "I shouldn't be here, I'm not like them." Lawson shook her head. "You're here because you saved them. You're here because you see what others miss. And you're here because you care, which is the rarest strength in a war like this." Reese's eyes burned. She looked away, ashamed of how raw she felt. Lawson stood. "Come back tomorrow, same time." Reese didn't answer. But she didn't say no. Later, outside the tent, the night air tasted of dust and diesel. The compound was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet where thoughts got too loud. Ryan found her leaning against a Humvee, staring into the dark. "You trying to run away?" he asked gently. She didn't look at him, just breathing. He stepped beside her, close enough to share space, far enough not to trap her. "You think what happened means you're weak," he said, "but it means you're alive." Reese scoffed under her breath. "Feels like weakness." Ryan shook his head. "Strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and choosing to keep going anyway." She swallowed the tight knot in her throat. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. "You barely know me." Ryan hesitated, longer than she expected. "I know enough," he said. "I know the look you get right before everything starts spinning too fast, because that look used to stare back at me in the mirror every day." Reese turned toward him, surprise softening her expression. "You," she whispered, "why?" Ryan looked out over the fence line, eyes fixed on memories he didn't want to keep. "First deployment," he said. "We lost 2 guys because I hesitated, thought I could shortcut fear, thought if I pretended I wasn't scared I could shoot cleaner." His voice cracked. "I shot wrong." Silence. Heavy, human. Absolving neither of them. "If fear was weakness," he said, "I'd be in a grave, not standing here annoying you." Reese let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Almost. Ryan's tone softened. "You're not a ghost, Caldwell, you're a person, and people shake." She wanted to believe him. But doubt always spoke louder. "What if I freeze again?" she asked. "Then I'll pull you back like before," he replied without hesitation. "And if I freeze, you drag me forward. That's the deal." Reese finally looked up, really looked, and saw not admiration, not expectation, just understanding. Her chest loosened slightly. "I don't want to be the reason anyone dies," she whispered. Ryan stepped closer, not touching but anchoring. "You're the reason we live." that hit harder than any bullet. Later in her quarters, Reese opened her grandfather's letter, the one she kept folded and worn inside her ruck. She'd read it 1,000 times. Tonight the words cut fresh. Courage isn't firing without fear. Courage is pulling the trigger while your fear screams louder than the shot. Her fingers trembled. She didn't wipe the tears that fell. She let them trace the truth down her face. She lay back, staring at the canvas ceiling, feeling her pulse slow, steady, but not calm. She wasn't fixed. She wasn't even close. But she was facing what broke her instead of running from it. That counted. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, sleep arrived without dragging nightmares behind it. Morning sunlight didn't bring peace. It brought purpose. Reese reported to Capt. Lawson again, not out of obligation but choice. "I came back," Reese said simply. Lawson smiled like she already knew she would. "You're not done learning how to breathe yet," she said. Reese nodded. "And I need to," she said. The healing was slow, like stretching a muscle that hadn't been used in years. But it moved. And that was enough. Within her chest, the fear didn't vanish. It made space. Fear would stay. But so would the strength to keep steady hands in the wind. Some heartbreaks don't disappear. They become armor. Reese Caldwell wasn't unbroken. She was rebuilding. And that made her dangerous in a new way. She finally understood what it cost her to pull the trigger. Which meant she would never waste a bullet. Not one. How many times could a person break before the pieces stopped fitting back together? Reese didn't know, but she suspected she was close to that limit. The mission briefing room was packed, air thick with urgency. Morrison's jaw clenched as he delivered the worst kind of news, the kind that demanded action faster than fear could form. "One of ours is down behind enemy lines," he said. "Petty Officer Ryan Hale, captured during a recon sweep." The words punched straight through her. Captured. Every nightmare she'd shoved down suddenly felt prophetic. A still image flickered onto the screen, Ryan being dragged into a compound by armed fighters, blood on his sleeve, a bag pulled over his head. Reese's pulse surged. The rival sniper had done this. She felt it in her bones. Rashidi was escalating, and he'd chosen the one person she couldn't afford to lose. Morrison continued. "They're setting up a fortified kill zone. Sniper overwatch expected. Caldwell, we need your eyes tonight." Her breath caught. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. He nodded at her, no hesitation, no doubt. Trust replaced contempt. "You're our shot caller on Overwatch," he added. The team's eyes shifted to her, not questioning, depending. She swallowed hard. "Yes, Chief." Inside, fear flared like wildfire. But so did purpose. Hours later, night coated the mountains in a blanket of dangerous silence. Reese led the Overwatch team up a jagged ridge, her movements quiet but determined, every step a decision not to fall apart. She placed her rifle, checked wind, analyzed thermal patterns. No panic, not this time. Breathe with the land. The valley below flickered with faint lights from the compound where they held Ryan. Men on guard towers. Machine guns angled outward like claws. Then she saw it, a faint thermal glimmer on a distant rock face. A sniper. Her sniper. Distance far. Angle steep. Margin for error, none. Her muscles tensed with recognition. This was the same hand that tried to take her life. And now had Ryan instead. Vance, the SEAL sniper beside her, whispered, "You call the shots, Caldwell, your read." She exhaled once, calm, commanding. "Hold fire. He's waiting for us to rush a shot. He wants to expose our position." Her voice didn't shake, and the team believed her instantly. A small victory, but a costly one. She scanned again. The rival sniper was good, too good. His camouflage used the rock's texture to break his silhouette into nothing. If she wasn't looking for him, she would have missed him. How long had he been watching her? She spotted a tiny shimmer next to him, a reflective strip of cloth. Her breath stopped. White keffieh, same as before. Same enemy. Same hunt. They were connected now, two ghosts dueling in darkness. Below, a door opened at the compound. Ryan was dragged into the courtyard, restraints tight, blood drying on his temple, his legs unsteady but his chin raised. He was scared, but like her, he chose not to show it. Reese's hand trembled on the scope, not fear, fury. She keyed the team net. Instructor Hale's still alive, two guards both restless, they're expecting us. She scanned rooftops and shadow pockets. Too many unknowns. Then Ryan's captor shouted something she couldn't hear but understood clearly. They wanted her to see. The sniper wasn't just baiting their overwatch. He was baiting her. Morrison's voice crackled in her ear. Caldwell, we need a plan. She stared at the valley, terrain angles, moonlight glare, enemy placements. Her grandfather's voice rose in memory. Aim small, Miss Small. She exhaled slowly. Flash distraction on my mark, she said. Sniper's keyhole view is fixed. I force him to reposition. That buys time for Alpha Team to breach west side while Bravo extracts Hale. And the rival sniper, Morrison asked. She swallowed the fear, the tremor, the doubt. I take him, she said, alone. The silence afterward felt like trust. Or doom. The team got into position. Every second sharpened tension to razor edge. Ryan lifted his chin, looking straight at the ridge where he knew she'd be. She could almost feel him saying, "Don't break, not now." Her finger hovered on the trigger. "Flash now," she whispered. A brilliant burst exploded near the compound gate, blinding guards, sending chaos spiraling. Gunfire erupted, the assault teams moving like shadows with rifles. Reese shifted angle fast, eyes locked on the sniper. He was already moving. He anticipated her move. He used the flash too. He was hunting her hunt. He repositioned 15 degrees right, small shift, massive advantage. He aimed at the assault team. Reese calculated faster than thought. Wind constant. Gravity drop minimal. One breath. She fired. Her bullet screamed through distance, a perfect arc, a perfect call. Impact. The sniper staggered, clipped shoulder, not fatal. But enough to break his focus. Enough to protect the entry team. He dropped behind cover. He wasn't done. Ryan fell to his knees, guard pulling a blade, yelling threats. Everything blurred, sounds muted, heartbeat loud. Reese aimed at the guard's temple, the world shrinking to a single point. Her mind tried to crack. What if you miss? What if you hit Ryan? What if the panic returns? She inhaled. She exhaled. She fired. The guard fell sideways, blade clattering onto concrete inches from Ryan's thigh. Clean, controlled, consequence accepted. Move, she commanded into the net. Alpha breached, Bravo sprinted. Ryan was ripped from danger, pulled into protective arms, alive. Reese shifted again, hunting the rival sniper. He popped up to fire at the extraction team. She fired first. His weapon jerked away, another hit, chest this time. Not dead, but down. He stared up at her ridge, distant, but she felt his eyes. There was no hatred, only acknowledgement. Two predators recognizing the other. A promise. One more shot remains between us. Extraction succeeded. Everyone was alive. But the victory tasted like unfinished war. Hours later, the base echoed with relief, the kind that comes after almost losing someone who mattered too much to admit. Ryan rested in the med-tent, eyes tired but alive. "Nice shooting," he whispered when she appeared at his bedside. Reese didn't smile. "You scared the hell out of me," she replied. "You scare me every day," he smirked. "We're even." She sat on the edge of his cot, hands clasped so tight her knuckles whitened. "You shouldn't have been out there alone," she said. "Neither should you." Silence. He reached out slow, placing his hand over hers. Her pulse stumbled. "You didn't freeze," he whispered. "You fought scared and you won." Her eyes stung, because the fear was still inside her. But so was the strength to beat it back. "Don't get comfortable," she murmured. "He's still out there." "I know." His gaze steadied. "And so are you." Reese swallowed the emotion threatening to break loose. For the first time, she let it stay. Not to weaken her. To remind her why she fought. Later alone, she cleaned her rifle under the stars. That ridge, that shot, that duel, it wasn't over. She knew he'd return. He'd won his final shot. She welcomed it. Because now, she knew something she didn't before. Broken things cut sharper than whole ones. And she was done apologizing for her edges. What is the price of being the one who sees the danger first? Reese Caldwell felt that question in every breath as she lay prone across the ridge, overlooking a shattered village pinned between mountains and fear. Dawn had not yet broken, but the world was already awake, restless, shifting, whispering warnings only she could hear. The rival sniper had vanished after their last duel, dragging his wounds and rage into the night. But she knew he wasn't done. A ghost doesn't stop hunting just because he bleeds. And now the Afghan army had intelligence. Rashidi's last fighters had retreated into a cave network cut into a cliff face. The enemy sniper was protecting them, a nest of desperation, a kill zone waiting to happen. The SEALs needed one clean shot to open the path. The world needed one quiet act to save many. Reese inhaled slowly. The air carried the taste of risk. Ryan lay beside her, no longer the one who needed saving, his arm wrapped in fresh bandages but his eyes clear and steady. Ready. "You find him yet?" he whispered. "Not yet," she murmured, "but he's here." She could feel him. Not physically, something deeper, a pressure beneath the wind, a stare against the back of her skull. He was watching just as she was. Two predators. One bullet ahead of fate. Her scope glided over rock shadows and jagged ledges. Everything looked like danger. Everything felt like it held breath, waiting. Ryan adjusted his binoculars, voice a quiet thread. "He hates you." Reese's lips tightened, a faint ghost of grim humor. "He fears me." "That too." She didn't smile. He was right. There is a thin line between fear and hatred, often the same shape, just viewed from another side of the rifle. Morrison's voice buzzed through comms, low and urgent. "We breach in 5. We need Overwatch dominance. Caldwell, take your shot when you have it." No demand. Just faith. Hard-earned faith. Reese scanned again. A flicker of light. Barely a shimmer, but enough. Her pulse slowed. She spotted a small reflective surface tucked deep into a crevice, the tiniest betrayal of position. "Got you." He was angled down toward the assault team route. He would fire the second the SEALs breached. Unless she stopped him first. Every lesson Eugene taught her rose like a tide inside her chest. The world listens when you prove it wrong. She started building the shot, math unfolding into art. Distance, 1,510 meters. Air density, low. Wind, unpredictable, swirling vortex near the cliff. Margin for error, none. Her heart beat once. Twice. steadier than fear wanted. Ryan slid a hand along the dirt near hers, not touching but present. "You've got this." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She exhaled and the world paused. But the enemy sniper was faster than predictions. He rose suddenly, adjusting his view toward the same path as the SEALs. He wasn't just watching the valley. He was watching her. She saw it then, clearer than any scope could show. In his eyes, a glint of recognition. In his posture, a vow. "You took my brothers. Now I take your purpose." He fired. Not at the team. Directly at her. The bullet screamed across the ridge inches from her cheek, spraying dirt into her eyes. She didn't flinch. Eyes stinging. Heart roaring. Fear demanding she freeze. But Ryan's voice cut through. "You fight scared, remember, fight scared." She blinked, grit away. Focus snapped back. The enemy repositioned, faster, smarter, vicious with survival. But she knew his rhythm now. He inhaled. He aimed. He exhaled. She fired. Two muzzle flashes overlapped, a single thunderclap of fate. Her bullet arced through the air like a promise kept. It struck first. The sniper jerked, spine twisting into the rock as his rifle fell from his hands. He slid down the cliff, disappearing into shadow with a final breath stolen by physics and resolve. Reese didn't cheer. Didn't smirk. Didn't feel victorious. She felt release. Like a breath she'd been holding since the first round she fired in this war. Ryan exhaled, relief shaking through his voice. That was perfect. Reese kept her eye to the scope, confirming stillness, confirming safety. "Move," she called into comms. "Overwatch clear, no sniper threat." The SEALs stormed the caves, coordinated violence with precise intent. Firefights echoed inside stone halls, shouts, then silence. The enemy leadership captured, Rashidi's network dismantled. The mission was won. But Reese's heart wouldn't let her celebrate. Not yet. Later, after the sun rose over the quiet valley, Morrison approached her on the ridge. The wind pushed dust across his boots. "You changed the course of this fight," he said. "No humor, no bravado, just truth. You've done more than any intel analyst ever has." Reese looked at the horizon, a jagged line between peace and the memory of war. "I did the job," she said. Morrison stepped closer. "No, you saved your team, again. And tomorrow command will want to make you something official, a role with recognition, authority, probably rank." She didn't answer. The weight of success pressed unexpectedly heavy. Morrison paused, voice softening, something few had ever heard from him. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." She wished the words felt real. That night in the mid-tent, Ryan sat upright on his cot, arm in a proper sling now. He watched her approach, eyes bright despite everything. "You're a legend now," he teased. Reese rolled her eyes. "Legends don't wake up screaming." His smile faded, replaced by concern, genuine and painful. "You still having the dreams?" She didn't answer directly. But silence sometimes said enough. He reached out his uninjured hand. This time she didn't hesitate. Her fingers slid into his, grounding, human, real. "You're allowed to be proud," he whispered. Her throat tightened. "What if pride doesn't fix what's broken?" she asked. "It doesn't," he said, "but it helps you stand while you heal." With him beside her, the nightmares felt less powerful. She didn't know what tomorrow held: training, command, a new unit who would look at her differently, respect finally earned. She didn't want glory. She wanted peace. Not the silence after a shot, the silence where no shot was needed. She walked outside alone later, staring up at stars that still burned even after light years of darkness. She held her grandfather's challenge coin in one hand and the seal coin in the other. Past, present, two lives converging in the same heartbeat. Her grandfather used to say that dignity isn't loud. It doesn't need applause, or permission, or recognition. It simply acts, quietly, when the moment demands it. Reese closed her eyes, letting the night wind move through her, not fighting fear, not ignoring it, just existing with it. She spoke to the air, to the ghost she carried. I am not the bullet. She opened her eyes steady, unbroken in her breaking. I am the reason it flies true. The wind didn't answer, but it didn't need to, because strength didn't speak tonight. Strength simply existed.